Welcome to the Soho Hotel. Thank you so much for coming on this very cold morning to our presentation today. I'm Rufus Olins, the Chief Executive of Newsworks, and today we're going to tell you a story which started about a year ago, and it began when we were talking about what project could we create that would demonstrate the scale of news brands in the UK and also the different platforms and mechanisms that were available to people. And we wanted to do something which involved collaboration on all sides. And the result was the Day of Influence. So we said 20 million people will be reached on one day with one campaign. And the question we asked was, how would you use the influence of the UK's national newspaper brands to get the nation talking and to change behaviour? That was the challenge that we issued to agencies and advertisers for the Day of Influence competition, which was back in February 2014. Inspired by the unique influence that news brands have on society, Newsworks and our 6 stakeholders offered £300,000 worth of free space across all platforms for just one day. And we presented it to the market as a real opportunity to make a difference, which could be for commercial reasons, it could be for CSR reasons, it could be a combination of both. So it could have been for a very big brand, or it could have been for someone's very heartfelt personal issue. And it was quite a bold move, we thought, on our part, because it meant that we had to have some confidence that if we created a Super Bowl moment, that it would pay dividends, that it would provide hard evidence that on one day of advertising in news brands, you'd get some really good results. Well, we did get some really good results initially, at least because 31 agencies competed for the prize. And here's a taster of some of the people.
We want to use our Day of Influence to tell people that Britain could lead the world in a new energy revolution.
I just need a kick up the arse.
The Day of Influence allows the opportunity to reach out to smokers to try and convince them of the detrimental impact each cigarette can have on their lives.
Prostate cancer.
Have you been tested?
We want to give 20 million people a moment to reflect. We are all Macmillan.
Don't know where your kids' clothes come from? We heard the idea to create a kids' clothing brand.
We hope that with your help we can share these inspiring examples of ways that technology could do good.
We want to work with news brands to create a virtual summer cooking camp.
That won't work. Let's stop doing it. So we had some great ideas, and we asked the senior executives from our 6 stakeholders to whittle them down to a shortlist. And a shortlist of 3 was chosen to present their case at Shift 2014. And we created a kind of Dragon's Den style pitch where we had a number of very senior clients interrogating the people that were having to present their cases. And then we asked the audience to vote, having listened to those discussions, on who they thought was the most worthy winner. And the winner, as many of you will know, was Emma Callaghan from PhD, with the idea to promote tourism to the Philippines with Expedia, their client. And what made it particularly poignant was that Typhoon Haiyan had hit not that long before, which had devastated the Philippines. And one of the knock-on effects had been that it had hit tourism, that people felt that actually it was a place to be avoided as a tourist. And the opposite, of course, is true, that what's the most important thing in rebuilding the economy is that people continue to visit and to spend money there. And it's sadly very topical because, as an issue a few days ago, a second typhoon hit, and it's becoming a kind of almost an annual occurrence in those islands. So it was an issue which had an important social dimension to it, but also an important commercial dimension as far as Expedia was concerned. And I'm really pleased that Emma is here today, along with all of the other key players that made this happen, to talk about how they did it, why they did it, and what the results were. So we have with us today Emma from PhD, Will Smith from Ogilvy and Mather, Sarah Hart from PhD, Jill Lloyd from Expedia, Richard de Villa from the Philippines Tourist Board, and our own Vanessa Clifford from Newsworks. So I'm now going to hand over to Emma, who will take up the story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rufus. Our story actually begins with Jill from Expedia, who you're going to be hearing from later, because this is a story of an individual who had a personal experience which made her consider how she could make a difference in the world. Jill first told me about Expedia's CSR project and the background behind it a year ago. It was during a visit to Tunisia that she met a taxi driver who had fought in the revolution there and had suffered tragic loss. And his greatest concern was that if tourism didn't pick up and if the economy didn't recover, well, everything he fought for would have been in vain. And it was this encounter that made Jill consider the power of tourism to shape a country's future. So her vision was to use Expedia's scale and influence to really make a difference by helping to encourage tourism to countries which were safe to visit but might have negative connotations associated with them following political or natural disasters. So in 2014, this meant the Philippines. In November last year, Typhoon Haiyan, which was one of the strongest cyclones ever recorded, devastated parts of the Philippines and affected 14 million people. Tourism accounts for 6% of the GDP and 8% of the country's employed population, and therefore had a really important role in the economic recovery of the country. But disasters can trigger vicious cycles, and lack of awareness and misconceptions often mean that even unaffected areas can suffer a decline in tourism. So Expedia raised a lot of money internally with their charity aid partners and set up press trips to share their story. But really we needed a partner to take this to the mass market. The Day of Influence was the only way to give the campaign a voice, so our objectives were very clear. We needed to address an issue and encourage education and understanding. So specifically, we wanted to raise awareness of the Philippines as a holiday destination, let consumers know that it was a safe place to visit, it was open for business, and to encourage consumers to discover more about the Philippines and about Expedia's CSR project. This wasn't a commercial project, so Expedia created the Travel That Matters site, which would educate and inspire about the Philippines, as well as explain the work they were doing with their charity partners. So all of the advertising was going to click through to this new URL. Because of the nature of news reporting, much of the focus back in 2013 was on the disaster. Haiyan made global headlines and was covered in every paper, making the front page in most of them, as well as every news site. We know that newsbrands are places where campaigning happens and that they are highly influential. So the Day of Influence competition was the perfect way to use newsbrands to tell a happier story and put the Philippines back into the news, but this time in a good way and for a positive reason. Newsworks also had some great stats linking newsbrand readers with travel brands. So, for example, 8 million people say that newsbrands influence holiday choice, and 32% of online newsbrand readers are more likely to visit travel websites than the average internet user. Using this insight, and with our objectives in mind, PhD put together a media schedule which would ensure we were highly impactful across multiple platforms using rich media and large formats. We knew that takeovers delivered great impact, so we planned multiple insertions and different formats, really allowing Expedia to tell a story through the paper. And now I'm going to pass over to Will from Ogilvy, who's going to take you through the creative journey.
So, as we've heard already today, in November 2013, the Philippines was thrust into the public spotlight due to a natural disaster. Despite this, it was actually relatively unknown as a tourist destination. That's despite its neighbours, Thailand and Vietnam, being enormously popular, as these statistics on tourists in 2013 show. To reverse this problem, we needed to drive awareness and consideration of the Philippines as a tourist destination. Although a worthy cause, we did not want to position the Philippines post-Typhoon Haiyan as a charity case. Instead, we wanted to celebrate its virtues, as we believed that this would drive the holiday bookings that would help get Philippines tourism back on its feet. That said, nor did we want to create sort of generic travel advertising that could become wallpaper amongst a sort of cluttered category. Instead, we decided to showcase the beauty and the richness of the Philippines by contrasting it to the Englishisms that tourists might find elsewhere. We thought this would really sort of appeal to tourists looking for both luxury and activity holidays, which are two key travel market segments for the Philippines. We had a mission to paint the papers blue. We created an extension of Expedia's successful Travel Yourself Interesting campaign, which coupled interesting and unexpected facts about the Philippines with stunning images of unspoiled islands, painting the papers and the news sites blue. So this is the first execution, and here you can see that we showcase the fact that the Philippines has 7,107 different islands, meaning that tourists visiting there can always sort of cut their own path. They never have to walk the beaten path, and they can sort of create a unique holiday for themselves. Given that we only had one day to stop people in their tracks and get them to consider the Philippines as a tourist destination, we had to create striking executions that would really stand out from the rest of the newspaper. The second execution highlights the Philippines' fantastic, diverse nature. The campaign ran on Friday the 29th of August across all the major UK newsbrand platforms. So that's print, online, tablet and mobile. This third execution displaying the fact that across the year the Philippines has more festivals than days in the calendar. So you're still definitely not going to come back with a generic sort of Glastonbury type experience if you go to the Philippines. 3 of the 4 executions showcased facts and images, and the 4th had more of a direct response message, driving people to an online competition where they themselves could win a luxury trip for 2 to the Philippines. Supporting this, we ran online homepage and travel section takeovers on the websites of the major news brands, which featured an inbuilt film supplied to us by the Philippines Tourist Board, further showcasing the unspoilt beauty of the Philippines. Our partners at Agnostic created a tablet media first, 2 ads within one file, meaning that we could serve users both the branded Facts in Ireland message and the competition message all in one ad at the same time. All online and tablet copy click through to the Travel That Matters blog, which housed the competition I discussed earlier, as well as interesting informational content about the Philippines and the recovery efforts post-Typhoon Haiyan. And now I will hand back to Emma and Sarah, who will talk you through the results.
So in terms of the results, we've been really overwhelmed with how well this campaign performed, considering it only ran for one day. We used reader panels and pre and post campaign tracking to gauge the success and the campaign's influence on people's awareness and understanding. So it certainly made an impact. 60% of readers recalled the campaign and an incredible 71% liked it. Just to recap on our objectives, a big part of what we wanted to achieve was around changing perceptions. And so we were really pleased to learn that 66% said the campaign made them feel differently, and 53% felt it told them something new about the Philippines. The post-campaign research delivered some other really positive shifts in attitude. So notably, a 23 percentage point increase in people definitely agreeing that the Philippines was a destination worth considering. And also an increase of 18 percentage point with people agreeing that it's a good destination for a luxury holiday. Very importantly, there was a 12 percentage points increase in people agreeing that the Philippines was a safe place to go. Encouraging consideration of the Philippines was also a key objective, and so we were thrilled to discover that very likely to consider doubled. And an amazing 62% of readers were motivated to find out more. And we know that people did actually go and find out more from the results that Sarah, Jill and Richard will be sharing with you later. We also collected lots of reader responses from the pre and post campaign tracking and the reader panels. We were thrilled with the comments from across the market. Really importantly, people felt very strongly about the advertising, whether they were a quality, mid-market or popular press reader. We were so pleased to uncover so much positive feedback from these responses, and also to note that the campaign had definitely delivered on our planned objectives in terms of awareness and education. And now Sarah will chat you through the media results.
So it's clear the campaign really influenced awareness, understanding and change in perceptions, but did that translate into people actually doing something about it? Did it actually drive action? While the campaign was not primarily intended as a response campaign, we still really wanted to encourage people to go to the Travel That Matters blog and discover really more about the unspoiled beauty of the Philippines and how a visit to the country could really make a big difference. The competition element really provided an added incentive for people to visit the site. The blog was set up by Expedia and the Philippines Tourist Board, who sent a selection of journalists, bloggers and employees from Expedia to document their experiences and stories from their visit to the Philippines. The site itself simply didn't exist before this campaign. It was specifically set up for this. So all traffic and the results can really be assigned to this campaign effect. When we first look at the digital Newsbrands campaign, we saw that it outperformed industry benchmarks by a huge degree. So 1.24 million online unique users were reached by the online Newsbrands. And also, coupled with this, it achieved a frequency of over 107% higher than the predicted, which was really important with this campaign only run for one day. Frequency was obviously a really important element for us. The Newsbrand audience were also clearly highly motivated to engage with the campaign content. The interaction rate was more than 160% higher than double-click benchmarks. And the video stats were also brilliant. The video was 28 seconds long in total, and the average video viewing time was only 3 and a bit seconds below this. The tablet ads, as Will mentioned, were created by Agnostic, and they saw a fantastic level of engagement with over 275,000 page views overall and almost 10,000 taps through to the Travel That Matters blog. The tap-through rate was 3.6%, and that's 246% higher than the Newsworks tablet project benchmark of 1.04 for retail and travel, so a huge, huge achievement. But it wasn't just digital ads that performed well. The print newspapers were also extremely effective at driving people to the blog. Even though this campaign was primarily a branding campaign, and with that it requires more reader effort in terms of actually typing in a URL, the print response rate of 0.18 was close to that of the digital click-through rate of 0.2. And when we compared this to other direct response print campaigns, this was 52% higher than the average benchmark. I'll now pass on to Jill, who'll take you through the business results.
So as Emma said, it was largely through Newsbrands that many people first became familiar with the Philippines. And sadly, that was in the context of a disaster. For many people, these were the images that they associated with the Philippines. So when it came to correcting those misconceptions and introducing a different view, working with these opinion formers was absolutely essential. But in order to avoid appearing overly commercial, as we painted the whole paper blue, we had opted to use a different site. So we weren't directing people to expedia.co.uk, but to a completely new site. And this meant that we were absolutely starting from nothing. We had no audience, we had no awareness, no search ranking. So it was a pretty tense day as we were waiting for the analytics to come through to see how many people would actually go through to the Travel That Matters site. But it was amazing to see that actually on the day of influence and the days that followed, we saw over 30,000 people coming through to the site. And that meant that they'd actually, in most cases, had to type in that URL and go straight through. That generated over 70,000 page views, which meant that 30,000 people were reading the stories on the blog trips, getting to know more about the Philippines and learning the real facts about the country. As Will mentioned, we did lure people in with the prospect of a competition to win a luxury trip to the Philippines, but we also made them work pretty hard for that. So they had to answer 7 questions about the Philippines and the scope of the disaster before they could even enter an email address. Over 3,200 people entered that competition. And what was really impressive was that we saw that over 90% of them were correctly answering all of those questions. And what was really interesting was that as the days progressed, the proportion of people correctly answering those questions actually increased. Now, our goal was to correct misconceptions and to remove the barriers to bookings, but we didn't really expect to see a very immediate impact on searches or bookings. So we hadn't even included the expedia.co.uk address, and a trip to the Philippines isn't exactly your classic impulse purchase. So we were really quite surprised, in fact, to see that over 45%, there was a 45% uplift in searches on expedia.co.uk compared to the previous week. And when we looked back, comparing it to 2013, before the typhoon had hit, there was a 55% increase. So this was a very clear testament to the power of newsbrand marketing, and we are really, really hugely grateful for this opportunity. It really wouldn't have happened without the team here, so thank you very much everyone for stuff. But this campaign is not simply about bookings. There are a lot of people with a very immediate need for support. So whilst tourism will help in the long term, we need to support people right now. So we've been donating to Habitat for Humanity whenever people book a trip to the Philippines for 7 nights or more. And we're really pleased that they've been able to rebuild around 14 homes for those affected by the typhoon. And they're rebuilding these homes designed to withstand the strong winds and to provide lasting protection. And in the wake of the recent typhoon, we've also decided to extend that through to 2015. And as Emma mentioned, the concept behind this CSR initiative was triggered by a personal experience. But that really wouldn't have been possible to make this a reality without the support of the wider team at Expedia who backed it, and of course without Newsworks. This really enabled PhD to pitch for the Day of Influence and ultimately to make this campaign happen. I think it says a lot about the very genuine desire at Expedia to use our business to help people. And we're really fortunate that actually we work for a company where our core business, tourism, plays such a direct and important role in people's lives around the world. And that's particularly true in destinations like the Philippines. So with that, I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you, Jill. The travel industry today is rapidly evolving and continues to become more and more inclusive. Travel these days is so much more than a holidaymaker visiting an attractive destination such as the Philippines and receiving a significant life experience. One's visit normally equates to the creation of one job in the service industry. It extends to both the livelihood and infrastructure development in places far beyond the main tourist spots of any destination. This is much more pronounced in countries like ours, whose tourism industry accounts for more than 6% of the GDP. Our tourism minister continuously espouses the fact that it is the people's business. It is everyone's involvement in the industry because it affects the country's brand and image. It affects the lives of everyone in the country, more than just the 2.9 million people employed directly in tourism. After Haiyan last year, it was important for our office to broadcast 2 messages. One, that 97% of the country was open for business, and the second, that we needed to continue support and visitors from the travel industry. With knowing the importance of tourism to our country, we needed to act expediently. We needed to show that it was safe to visit the country, especially that most of the destinations that they normally go to were relatively unaffected. We presented travelers in this industry with up-to-date photos from numerous resorts around the country. At the same time, we had to present to travelers that their visit to the Philippines for tourism would have a profound and lasting effect towards relief efforts and infrastructure rehabilitation. We are wholeheartedly thankful by how the industry responded, rallied, and mobilized their support. For the Philippines to be a beneficiary of such an important and exciting pilot campaign by Newsworks, Expedia, and the other brands involved was such a definite boon to the country. Having worked closely with Jill and her bloggers from the start, who we must say have generated an exceptional amount of content for the Philippines, to seeing the results, we are greatly pleased by how it all turned out, especially it was a new endeavor for many of us. The short-term results included increase in correct awareness, perception, and heightened interest in the destination. The week after the Day of Influence, many of our walk-ins to their office and inquiries more than half of them reported seeing that the campaign and were pleased to see the Philippines displayed in such a way. The long-term effects are something that we will continue to feel many years after this campaign wraps up. And it really has shaped and changed the perception on the Philippines as a whole. And for that, we will always be grateful. Especially now that there's another typhoon that just finished the Philippines. The country continues to change and adapt to how we deal with these calamities and how we react as quickly as possible. We see tourism as an important tool in both generating the right information and awareness about a destination, as well as showcasing the country's attractions. Incidentally, next year is Visit Philippines year, so we encourage you all to visit. Thank you.
So, the big question for me is, do you think this campaign would have worked if it hadn't been for Newsbrands? Now, obviously, as Newsbrands, my answer to that is, no, of course not. It couldn't have been done anywhere else, could it? So obviously we think that. But there's actually plenty of evidence to back this up. Newsbrands build reach and frequency very quickly in one single day across multiple platforms. It's just not that easy to engage with 20 million people in any other kind of medium out there. Where else can you do that? Just in one day, remember. But we also had the opportunity here to think about asking some people and everything in amongst all our kind of readership surveys and the questions that we've got as to actually what other impact does it have on people? Because we know from work that we've done before that actually Newsbrand content is highly trusted, it has personal identification in there, and it does rub off on advertising. We also know that it drives lots of social sharing and readers amongst the most active and influential online. So, from the reader panels and from the pre and post research, we realised that readers recognise the importance and resonance of this Newsbrand environment. Over 3/4 believed that the newspapers were a really good place to showcase what the Philippines had to offer tourists. 2/3 think that newspapers reach people that are much more likely to be influencing their friends and their family. And there's also strong agreement that Newsbrand advertising has greater standout and importance, and that trust is when they're seen in newspapers. We were delighted that we were able to demonstrate these facts and these figures, and our collaboration with Expedia and Ogilvy really showcases this. We're delighted that the Philippines looks set to gain more visitors, hopefully, and continues to rebuild its tourist economy out there. I've got one more fact up there. Now, that's enough from me. It really is a really quick wrap up here. I'm going to be joined back at the front here, which is why these chairs are here, by the gang here, if anyone's got any questions for them. I've got one or two, so you don't have to be first up with hands if not. So if you can join me at the front. Right, this is a kind of Jill, Emma, you can answer in whatever you want to know, and I kind of have to ask this first, don't I? So, you didn't have to pay for this campaign, but should you have done so, would you consider that it was good value?
Yes.
And I think I defer to Emma on that.
Well, I think the results kind of speak for themselves, don't they? I think that the campaign delivered beyond our sort of wildest dreams on a lot of the objectives. So, yeah, I think I would have to say yes. Of course, these brands are great.
Yes, wasn't a setup at all. Also, one for Jill. As we've repeated, all of us, many times over, it really was just one day that we did this, and we've seen that the effects of it straight on that day were really good and really strong. How long have you seen the impact of this continuing afterwards?
Yeah, I think that was the tricky thing, is that it's just one day, so you really have to make a massive impact on one day. And we really weren't sure how that would work, actually. So we're really pleased that the effects have gone on for weeks and weeks afterwards. We saw people entering the competition, we saw people coming to the site and commenting, and then it's really our job to pick that up. So the Day of Influence was a fantastic opportunity to kick-start interest in the Philippines and to counteract that cycle of decline that Emma showed at the beginning of the presentation. But now it's really over to us to make sure that we continue that momentum.
And Will, I guess it's not very often that someone comes to you guys and goes, right, we need you to create a campaign for us, but it's only ever going to run one day. That's it, one day, no one's going to see it after that. Which must be, from the creative directors, kind of a bit of a, oh. But creatively, we set out to paint the papers blue. How do you think it went?
Well, I think the results testament to the fact it went brilliantly. I think that in order to succeed in a one-day campaign, you need to kind of have disruptive media placements, and I think with the page-dominant press placements and the homepage takeovers, we certainly got that, and I think in combination with the kind of striking work that stood out from the clutter, I think the results proved that it did work fantastically and was certainly worthwhile.
Cool. Have you got any questions from, one down here? There's a microphone if you...
Is there anything that you do differently if you do the campaign again?
What do you think, Sarah?
Probably start. I think with the results being so strong, I don't think we would. The results were just so positive across the board, both from the print results and tablet and online as well. So I think the way we went at it with the kind of really impactful formats across the board really seemed to work. So I think we would really keep that strategy if we were ever to do it again.
Yeah.
And there's one back there.
You've obviously shared results in terms of people searching or going onto the website, but do you have any direct results in terms of people actually booking to go to the Philippines?
Yeah, we have seen an uplift in bookings. I can't tell you what that is, sadly, because it's commercial data, but yeah, there definitely has been an uplift. So it really has worked for us in terms of generating more bookings through to the Philippines, and I think Richard
And for us, I think the effect is something that will last for years and years. It's definitely been a perception change to how the Philippines is presented, and immediately, even though people don't book a holiday right after seeing the campaign, even for this year, if they have their holidays planned out already for 2014, definitely they will consider it coming 2015, 2016, 2017, which is for us a very positive thing.
And
just interested to know if you've got any learnings about the different channels and how they perform. So traditional media and newspaper versus digital, and if you did the A/B testing around the combination of digital with traditional in the context of this campaign.
Well, I think we were really surprised by how well the traditional print did compared to the digital, because this was a new URL. Anyone that was going to visit the Travel That Matters site from seeing a print ad was going to have to type in a brand new URL that, you know, it was nothing to do with Expedia's main site. So we were, the measurement that we did versus a direct response campaign was a really good uplift. I think that they just worked really well with each other. I think that, you know, all the digital benchmarks were so much, well, all the results were so much higher than industry benchmarks. And I think what it really showed was using multiple platforms with Newsbrands is a really effective way to deliver a campaign.
I think it was quite surprising that also we saw really strong results across the board. So it wasn't just like one or two newspapers or Newsbrands that were leading that. It was really the whole selection that we worked with.
Yeah.
Hi, Emma from the Mail. Will you be planning more press activity for all of your travel clients now?
Definitely. Print is always very much a core channel for us working on Expedia. So and this just kind of backs it up even more. So definitely, it's going to be a strong element of it.
There's lots of different sectors that can deliver you reach nowadays. Different media sectors. Did you get a sense of what Newsbrands sort of delivered uniquely that you wouldn't have got if you'd used radio or television or online pure play?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of, we know digitally that we reached, for example, the stats within the presentation, 1.24 million across the digital platforms, and then within print, I mean, I suppose we have the idea of the reach there as well. With this solely sitting in Newsbrands, we didn't consider comparing it versus any other channels, but we realised obviously there's a strong kind of reach in other channels as well. But yeah, I mean, this was very much just focused on Newsbrands.
And I think because of the reporting of the typhoon, it was really about kind of trying to flip that that reporting on its head and use Newsbrands as a way to deliver positive news. I think that's why it worked so nicely.
Brilliant. Well, one last thing from me. We promised we would have you out by 10 o'clock, which we will do. Guys by the door here, we've done a very small but kind of thing here with all the relevant stats and facts and everything like that you'll need, so you didn't need to scribble lots of notes and everything like that. And certainly kind of later on, if not today, then tomorrow, this as a whole presentation will be up on our site, so it'll be there and you can download it and use it in any way that you would like to do so. Thank you to everyone here for sharing all their facts and film, to Emma and Jill and Sarah and Will and Richard at the end there, so if you join me in thanking them. But also, thank you for all, as Rita said, it's a chilly old Tuesday morning this, so thank you for being here for breakfast, and we look forward to seeing you again, if not this year, then certainly early in the new year.